Chapter 17. The next day I felt out of sorts and off my routine, so I stayed away from all things Penworth. I visited the hardware store and picked up a large coil of 3/8-inch refrigerator-grade copper tubing, a 1/8 to 7/8 inch tubing cutter, and a device that bends the tubing without crimping it. Not crimping the tubing is crucial. I also picked out some brass compression fittings, a length of flexible plastic hose, and an adapter that would attach one end of the plastic hose to my kitchen faucet. At home, I turned on the cooking channel for background noise, and then picked up the tubing cutter, a small contraption that looks a bit like a vise. You tighten it gently onto the tubing and spin it around until the tubing is scored, then apply pressure and the tubing snaps in two. I picked up one end of the loose coil of tubing at my feet and practiced using the cutter until I could get a clean cut without crimping the ends. That's what I needed for a leak-proof seal with the compression fittings. Then I picked up a small, tightly wound spring, the interior of which was the same diameter as the outside of the tubing. It widened slightly at each end so the tubing could be inserted easily and then gently bent without getting kinked. I practiced on the slightly curved pieces I had already cut off the coil. After a little while, I had several short, straight lengths of copper tubing. I didn't need them, but I had learned how to use my new tools and was ready to begin my project. I picked up one end of the long coil, inserted it into the spring, and began to straighten it, giving myself a straight section about 6 inches long. Then I put in a 90-degree bend, followed by a straight section 12 inches long, and another 90-degree bend at a right angle to the first one. Then I began tightening the curve in the rest of the tubing, creating a narrower, downward spiraling coil about 12 inches in diameter. This was slow work, and it exercised my patience. Several times I had to stop to massage a cramp out of my hand. I kept half an eye on Mario Batali as I worked. He was working on a rolled stuffed leg of lamb that looked great, accompanied by some Brussels sprouts with pancetta. Once the coil was about 1.5 feet deep, I put in 2 more 90-degree bends separated by a straight section of only 2 inches, so the tube came straight back up the side of the coil, followed by a final bend that brought the last section of the tube parallel to the tubing at the beginning of the whole contraption. I cut 2 6-foot lengths of the flexible plastic hose and used the pressure fittings to attach one length to each end of the copper coil. Then I attached the faucet adapter to the loose end of one length of plastic tubing, leaving the end of the other length bare. When I was done with this, I got a 10-gallon stock pot out of a closet and put the coil inside it. I attached one plastic hose to the faucet and ran the hose from the other end of the coil back into the sink. I turned the cold water on low so that it ran through the flexible tubing into the copper coil, out the other end of the coil, into the second plastic tube, and down the drain. I slowly cranked the water pressure all the way up to full, checking for leaks. Finding none initially, I let the whole thing sit for a while, running at full blast to make sure it would hold up. It did. So, now I had a wort chiller, which is used to rapidly cool wort, the boiling liquor from which beer is fermented. It's important to cool the wort down quickly so you can pitch your yeast before the wort gets contaminated by wild yeasts and other stuff that just runs around in the air. When I was done with all of this, I felt a little more centered. The pleasures of a hobby. After a bike ride, I returned home to a message from Dennis Keneally telling me that Detectives Jenkins and Cleary were dodging his calls. It was too late to call Keneally back at the office, so I took a shower, went out again for a solitary dinner, and returned home for some television and an early bedtime. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I continued to busy myself with the details of my life, such as it was. I brewed a batch of beer, and my new wort chiller worked admirably. I dry mopped the wooden floors of the landings in my building and fixed a couple of places where the runners were coming loose on the stairs. Don't want anyone to trip and have a lawsuit on our hands. Sunday, I was enjoying the Times crossword puzzle while a pot roast seethed in the oven covered with some Lagunitas Imperial Stout. I got the recipe from Brew Food, a cookbook published by my best buddy from college. All the recipes used, you guessed it, beer, my favorite ingredient. The phone rang. It was Leo. "Hey," he said when I picked up. "Hey yourself," I said. "What's happening with the Alex thing?" "Well, I kind of dropped it for a while." "Yeah? You seemed so excited about it the other night." "I guess I kind of lost interest. I didn't want to elaborate. I didn't want to talk about it, not even with Leo, my closest friend. He sensed my reticence. "So I guess you're not going to the memorial tomorrow night?" he asked. "For Alex? It's tomorrow night?" "Ah," he said with portent. "What? Ah, what does that mean?" "That means I figured Cynthia would have told you about the memorial, and since she didn't, we haven't spoken for a couple of days." "Right. Ah, leave me alone." "Sorry," he said, and then he was silent. He was good at that. "Why are they having the memorial on a Monday night?" I asked. "Isn't that an odd time?" "Not when all your friends are waiters or actors." "Right. You're going." "I am expected to speak." "You sound like you don't want to." "I have mixed feelings about it. He was a student, but I didn't know him that well." "Seems like no one knew him that well." "Except Cynthia," he said. "I have my doubts even about that." "You do? Why? I thought they were really close." "I don't doubt that their feelings were genuine in a big brother, little sister kind of way. As to how well she really knew him, I don't know. He's got all this stuff in his past that she's alluded to, but she doesn't know any of the details, any of the players, and what was going on in the last months of his life with the restaurant or whatever the hell it was. She's got some bits and pieces, but she really doesn't have a clue." "You sound angry." "I am." "Why?" "I'm not sure, and I don't want to talk about it." "Fair enough. So are you going to be there?" "Maybe." "Where is it?" "At the studio." He meant the acting studio where he taught on the Lower East Side. I knew the address. "What time?" 8 o'clock. "Okay, I'll see you there, if I'm there." "Okay," he said, and we rang off. Monday morning, I got my stitches removed, and that afternoon, as the clock ticked slowly towards 8, I grew increasingly frustrated. I tried to read more of the Kurlansky, learning about salt domes in the United States and their strategic importance during the Civil War, about Avery Island and the beginnings of Tabasco sauce, but I couldn't focus. I turned on the television, but kept losing the thread of the news. I tried the Food Network, but even Alton Brown's Good Eats couldn't keep me distracted. At 7:15, I was picking through my closet for something appropriate to wear. My old legal beagle suits would stand out amidst the downtown actor crowd, and the rest was mostly jeans and t-shirts, but I didn't want to look disrespectful. Even though I was sure no one at the service would give a damn, I still carried enough of my early upbringing to feel respect for the dead and for this time of mourning. I finally settled on my best black t-shirt, black jeans, Doc Martens, and the jacket from a black silk suit. As I dressed, old words in Aramaic meandered unbidden through my mind. When I finished, I checked myself in the mirror. I looked just hip and disaffected enough to blend in. "Last chance," I said to my reflection. It didn't answer. So I grabbed my overcoat and, against my better judgment, I headed out the door. I had to hurry. I've always been uptight about being late, a trait that was reinforced through the years of law school and practice, when tardiness could at best incur the wrath of a judge and, at worst, lose an important skirmish in the ongoing battle to protect a client's rights. Then, having rushed to get there, I ended up being early. I didn't want to be stuck with no one to talk to, so I lingered on the sidewalk across the street from the studio. A light rain started to fall. I was without an umbrella, and as I moved a few doors down and took shelter in the awning of a pet store, a woman came walking quickly down the street and joined me. She wore a gray-green overcoat, tall, old-fashioned laced-up shoes, and a scarf over her head. She must have been wearing it before the rain started because there hadn't yet been time to put it on. She, too, watched the doorway across the street. Soon people started to enter the studio through the small door wedged between a candle and card shop on one side and a liquor store on the other. Cynthia arrived in the company of a woman and a man carrying a guitar case. Finally, Leo turned the corner, coming from the direction of his apartment. I smiled tightly at my companion under the awning, dashed across the street through the increasingly heavy rain, and caught Leo just as he opened the door. "You made it." "Yeah, my curiosity gets the better of me." "I'm glad you're here." "Why? Misery loves company?" "You got it. Somebody who knew him even less than I did. Maybe you should speak." The only talking I'm going to be doing is to myself, and very quietly. "Kaddish?" I looked at him, surprised. "How the hell did you know that?" "Old habits die hard." "You're telling me," I said, as we trudged up the stairs, Leo folding his umbrella. We entered the small room that passed for a lobby. Off of this were the even smaller office, two combination water closet changing rooms, one for men, one for women, and the large room in which the actual classes took place. The walls of the lobby were festooned with posters, flyers, and notices. Some were professionally printed, many colors on glossy paper, others clearly designed on home computers, still others clumsily hand-lettered. There were posters for student showcases, new works by new playwrights, others by Shakespeare, Chekhov, and Ionesco. There were advertisements for headshot photographers, personal trainers, vocal coaches, audition workshops, resume services, bodywork classes of various methods, the whole industry that fed off the tight wallets and fervent dreams of the aspiring actors who studied here and at the other acting schools that flourished throughout the city. There were pleas for apartment mates and roommates, for part-time jobs, ads for catering services, babysitting services, dog walking services. These walls were a testament to hope, but they did nothing to inspire it. The room was crowded, but people made room for Leo as we edged our way through, smiling at their teacher as he passed. A few greeted him by name. In the main studio, chairs were set up, facing a wall that was covered its entire length, floor to ceiling, with a mirror. A black velour curtain was pulled to one side at its far end. I presumed the mirror was there for movement or dance classes so the students could observe their own form, and that the curtain was there so that the reflection would not distract when actual acting work was going on. What a strange, self-conscious discipline it must be, I thought. Against the other wall were two long tables, partially covered with platters and bowls of food, and an assortment of soda and liquor bottles, plastic plates, cups, and flatware. Two large galvanized tubs, one filled with beer and one with ice, were on the floor. Cynthia was there, organizing the arriving contributions to the potluck. She spotted us and gave me a quick, friendly hug. "I didn't know you were coming." "Neither did I. Leo told me about it." It seemed like there should be more to say, but I couldn't think what it might be. Apparently, neither could Cynthia. She was distracted, oddly upbeat, almost giddy. She turned to Leo. I guess we should wait until just about 5 minutes after. Then I'll settle the room down and we can get started. After you speak, we'll have the poem and then open it up to anyone else who might have something to say. Tom is going to wrap it up with a song. Then we can break for the food and people can mix for as long as they want. I figure that's the most important part of this thing. Give people some time to talk about what's happened, to digest the whole thing. As Cynthia was talking, someone pulled the black curtain from the end of the room, covering the mirror on the wall. The image made me flash back on the gatherings of my youth. People always congregate to address together the unanswerable questions posed by death. Even in these casual surroundings, there is a pattern to how the human animal processes grief. I remembered the days sitting Shiva, the darkened rooms, covered mirrors, and food. Always food, platters and serving dishes piled, overflowing with food. Much of it rich, fattening, almost lusty, to remind the body that it is still alive, to keep the soul rooted on this plane. The endless stream of family, friends, acquaintances, all gathering to honor the memory of the dead and to affirm that life goes on. All this swirled through my consciousness as Cynthia brought the room to order and people found seats in groups of 3 or 4. As Cynthia introduced Leo, I took a seat alone towards the rear. I glanced around the room and noticed that I didn't see Alex's parents. I wondered whether they had been invited or had simply decided not to come. I'd have to ask Cynthia. As Leo stepped to the front of the crowd and placed some note cards on a music stand, my companion from the awning slipped into the room. She removed her overcoat, revealing a pastel print Laura Ashley dress that was seriously out of place in these surroundings. She carefully folded her overcoat and used a tissue to wipe off her seat before sitting in the back row to my right. My attention was drawn away from her curious behavior when Leo began to speak. "Good evening," he began, and then he paused and waited for the room to settle. 20 days have passed since Alex Penworth died, and we are all adjusting to a world without him. For some, numbered perhaps amongst his closest friends, that process is difficult. For others, of recent or casual acquaintance, it is not. How hard it is for each of us depends on a number of things, on how well we knew him, how well we deal with this type of thing, the sudden, unexpected loss of a friend, a loved one. I suspect his memory will fade a little more for each of us with every passing day. I venture to say that a time will come for most of us in this room when he will never cross our thoughts again. After all, what was he to most of us? A classmate for a year, a co-worker at a restaurant for a few months, a fellow cast member for a few weeks. Why should we carry his memory with us forever? He was not a child, a parent, a sibling. So soon we'll forget about him. And that might be okay. Or maybe it's not okay. I look around this room and I know most of you. I see people who are students here, actors. I see some writers I know, some directors. All of you in this room, all of you that I know, have chosen to pursue an avocation, to embark on a creative life, the uncertain life of an artist. I also see a few faces I don't recognize. My guess is that you are from this same community, most of you, or you wouldn't be here, honoring this friend, this acquaintance. None of you have traditional occupations. None of you you're living at jobs that you enjoy. Each of you ekes out an existence at work that, at best, you feel antipathy towards, at worst, you loathe. Why do you do this? Because you fancy yourselves artists. You are unwilling to trade your calling for a meaningless, menial day that will provide security. You have something to say, and you are trying to learn how to say it. Some of you don't know how to say what you want to say effectively, and so you are struggling at schools, in workshops, in showcases. Some of you don't even know yet exactly what it is you want to say. You only know that you are driven not to fit in with the status quo. That is what I think Alex was like. And I knew him as well as anyone here, with the possible exception of Cynthia. I glanced over at Cynthia, sitting in the front row on the right. I noticed that although her eyes were shining, she wasn't crying. Now, that is a sad thing to say, Leo continued. It is sad to say that I knew him as well as anyone here, because I didn't know him. Not really. He died before I got the chance to know him better, before any of us got that chance. But I do believe he struggled toward the same goals we strive to reach, and from the little I know, I believe he struggled courageously. He left a family life of privilege to pursue his dream in near poverty. He pursued that dream in spite of the disapproval of his family, of all those who knew him in his previous life. At this, I heard a noise off to my right and saw the well-dressed woman stifling a sob with a fist in her mouth. And then Alex died before his dream could be realized. And we don't know what it was that he wanted to say. That is the great loss that his death represents to me. And it is the challenge that his death issues to all of us. Don't waste time. Say what you have to say. Sharpen your instrument. Refuse to live your life in such a way that the people around you don't know you and experience you. Inspire those around you to do the same. The deepest pain of loss comes from regret for things left unsaid and deeds left undone. Don't let yourself fall prey to this regret. To know and be known is the obligation of the artist. That is what those who leave behind, and that is all that we who are left behind have to keep. Leo stood at the music stand for a moment, looking at the people assembled in the room. Then he nodded slowly, collected his note cards, and took a seat in the front row. And that is the end of chapter 17. So, if you're not going to stick around for chapter 18, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and click the bell to get further notifications. And also head over to my website, MatthewArkin.com, and subscribe to my newsletter so that you can get the articles that I write on acting and writing that come out in my occasional newsletter.